The MedFacts podcast is your monthly prescription of medicine with your host, Miskwa, the Mad Clown Prophet. Hello, and welcome back to the MedFacts. I am your host, Miskwa, the Mad Clown. And in episode 4, we are meeting with artist Lucille Atlookan. They take us through their personal disability story and life in notorious Thunder Bay, Ontario, as they create safer spaces for Indigenous youth. Anine Bojo, Lucille, how are you today?
I'm good.
I'm so delighted to have you on the MedFacts. And I know you very well, but can you tell our faithful listeners who you are and what you do?
Okay. Hi, my name is Lucille Atlookan. I'm a Neechee Spirit artist from Eabametoong First Nation, and I live in Thunder Bay. And I am a program coordinator for Neechee Studio. And I'm a youth worker as well.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what Neechee Studio is and what it does?
Well, Neechee Studio is a free art and culture program for Indigenous youth in Thunder Bay. We hold monthly workshops at definitely Spear Art Gallery. Sometimes we have it in other places as well. And it's for youth who are about 14 to 29 years old. And it's run by mostly Indigenous youth. We have a team called the committee, and they help coordinate and facilitate workshops.
That sounds pretty impressive. How did it all get started?
It started about 10 years ago in 2013. I was just happened to be at a meeting, and a few people were gathering to discuss a grant to do something, and they were talking about stuff that was already been done, like a 1-day conference kind of thing. And I brought up that, what does a conference do when it's just a one gathering, if it's like a 1-time thing for the year. So I brought up about doing art workshops throughout the school year.
Oh, that's a pretty exciting story. So because you're situated in Thunder Bay, like a city that has a pretty notorious reputation for various things, I'm wondering how yourself as an artist and also your collective has dealt with cultural appropriation. Is that something that you experienced?
Yeah, I experienced that when I started to learn more about it. I encountered cultural appropriation they call it a yard sale, and these people were making dream catchers.
A classic appropriation object, yeah.
Yeah, and they were asked if they were Indigenous, and they said no. My friend was the one who noticed it right away, and we brought it up with the organizer for the event. And it was hard to go up to one. I went up to one vendor, and they started crying.
Oh no, the classic trope of the white tears.
Yeah, then asked me if I can show them how to do it differently.
Some free labor as the icing on the cake.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the few things that we experienced, and we We also experience culture abuse.
Is this something that you would like to elaborate more on? Is there a story here that you want to tell?
Yeah, in 2015, around that time, we made hand drums.
Oh, amazing.
We had a traditional helper come in and teach us. And he was telling everyone that, like how to take care of it because it becomes ours. There's like protocols. And the next day, well, one of the people we were working with, with Neechee Studio, he took the drums away from us, and a lot of youth were upset.
I can absolutely understand why. Had the drums been birthed yet?
Yeah, they were birthed, and it was just me and my friend. My friend Matilda Shigonakrep, she's a co-founder at Neechee Studio, and when we tried to bring it up, we were shut down with tears and saying that youth, you don't take care of their things. It might end up in the closet, and it did end up in the closet, but it was at Definitely Spirit Art Gallery that they were kept.
Wow.
In a locked metal cabinet.
That's such a like you said, like a cultural trauma, especially when I think about the impact of residential schools and on children, and the way that CAS continues to operate this to this day, to have drums taken away, which are essentially, just created like children. It makes such a terrifying parallel. That is, I'm really sorry to hear that happened, Lucille. That's a terrible thing to have to go through.
Yeah, it was tough. It took a long time to recover.
Yeah, I can imagine that. That's a pretty intense story. So other experiences in Thunder Bay that you've gone through as an artist and as an art collective with Neechee. What about me being a white native? What's your experience with tokenism?
Well, as I'm basically like a brown, and I noticed that when I look back, I was tokenized a lot. And there was like a lot of gatekeeping too.
And how did that show up?
It showed up with when I had a falling out with a white settler gatekeeper, and I was like the shut out from the art scene, the non-Indigenous art scene in Thunder Bay.
Why did you get shut out? I'm sorry. Do you want to elaborate on what led to this happening?
Well, it's a lot of like talking with the person I was working with, and like my concerns were not, like they weren't taken seriously, and I kept trying to bring it up that what's happening, how it's making me feel like as if I don't have a voice.
That's an unfortunately common experience I find when people talk about the impacts of microaggressions, as something I've noticed as well. And I think it's especially hard to experience gatekeeping when you're in like a small community, because even the cities in Northern Ontario are pretty small. So now nowadays it seems we kind of have like a throwback to the 1960s where it was pretty trendy and cool to be Indigenous somehow. And so the topic of pretendians has and race shifting has been something that's kind of taking the Indigenous art scene by force because it impacts so many people's jobs. And, you know, you hear about it happening a lot in academic circles and big cities, but is it something that you see in Thunder Bay as well?
Yes, I see that like a lot too. And we did have someone who was who was doing woodland painting and copying Nova Mars. So she took like she was a student at Lakehead University as well. She took the education program. So that's when I started noticing like cultural appropriation and pretendians. Like we ended up like encountering even more, like with this other artist who was doing woodland art and labeled as an Indigenous artist. And yeah, people, you know, they were like, some people were like defending them.
Defending them pretending, or they thought that their identity was legitimate, or why were they defending them?
Well, one of them was that, you know, this one artist, he, you know, I guess he was backed up by another woodland artist who was native and was saying like, you know, like we share our gifts and stuff like that, but then this artist makes money off of it, which takes away from Indigenous artists.
Oh, and for anyone listening at home who isn't aware of the stats for Indigenous artists, I think painters specifically have a median income. Indigenous painters have a median income of $17,000 annually. I think it's actually less for men. Surprisingly enough. I think for them, if it's 15,000, this is from 2016 StatsCan, so we're definitely due for an update. But just knowing the funding for the art sector, like not much has gone up, so I can't imagine that those numbers have gone up much more. And in our times of inflation, it's I think a pretty dramatic impact to be putting your money into a non-Indigenous artist making Indigenous art. I'm curious what you think about any Indigenous artists, even if they have that legitimate identity, still appropriating pictographs, which also have like protocols around how they can be depicted and by whom.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too is, you know, they start to claim that they have like this Métis artist was claiming that they made this pictograph they got inspiration from, but it was actually traced. And then they're claiming that they have an Anishinaabe relative.
Like one relative, like one uncle, like how does that work exactly?
Well, it was this one relative that they were talking about that they're related to Anishinaabe.
There's definitely a lot of folks that are reconnecting with some ancestral identities. It's not something that I personally understand, so I won't speak on it. But it's definitely an issue that's greatly impacting Indigenous artists everywhere. Speaking of Indigenous artists and Thunder Bay, what are your thoughts on the new Thunder Bay documentary that's on Crave?
I had no idea, like, I kind of know that I was gonna, like, how it's, like, fuck, I don't know. Anyways, one more time. watched the film on Crave, and I had a small part in it.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we were talking about youth suicide, and I had a trigger while we were filming. We were playing pool at the time, and I had to take some time to, put myself together and talk about what brought it up.
It's a massively common experience given the numbers of our relatives that are struggling with their lives. So I can absolutely see why that topic was triggering to you.
Yeah, especially when recently my cousin passed away by suicide.
I'm so sorry that you've had to go through that, Lucille, and your family.
Yeah. And, after I watched the whole film, I noticed that it was just about the speaker, the main speaker.
Oh yeah, what's that guy's name again?
Ryan McMahon.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've heard some not so nice things about that guy.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was gonna be like a huge thing, and there was I was kind of worried that there might be backlash, that people in the film might get targeted for racism in Thunder Bay.
Oh, that's so true. Was there any follow-up or support for the people that were in the film?
No, there is nothing. I didn't. Nobody reached out to me or anything like that, and the film is just, it just talks about things that we already know, that
the hot topics that the people on Reddit want to hear about.
Yeah, it's mostly just about trauma.
The infamous trauma porn. That the documentary about Thunder Bay, it actually reminds me it reminds me of another film that our mutual friend Ardell Sashikaway was in. Do you remember that one? Can you tell me more about that?
Is that the one that's coming together to talk?
Yeah. And that was by people living in the area, for people in the area, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they had some non-Indigenous people speak in there too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're trying to show the differing and multitudes of perspective.
Yeah, we had one person talk about Neechee Studio, and they weren't native.
How did they get the role?
They were reached out. They wanted someone from Neechee Studio to come and talk about it. I happened to miss it that one day, so they just took hers instead.
So is Neechee Studio Indigenous run now?
Yes.
Okay. So
I would say it was kind of hard to reclaim our I don't know how would you call it, maybe our power.
Yeah.
Over Neechee.
Well, as someone who knows you personally, one thing I'll definitely say is that you've definitely grown into your own voice, and I'm really happy to hear it.
Yeah, we finally have space to speak. It feels like a fresh breath of air.
Yeah. Well, that's really inspiring and good to hear. And I noticed that you've been putting on some makeup while we're talking. So now that you're all hot, tell me about your dating life.
Oh my God. Just kidding. Well, I was on Tinder for a while.
What's your favorite dating apps?
I would guess Tinder and Bumble. Bumble, not as much though. And I was on Facebook dating. Hey, just lots of dating apps.
So, from all the dating apps that you've used, do you have a top 5 red flags and a snag?
Yes.
Amazing. Let's hear
So,
them.
the top one has multiple baby mamas.
Who doesn't these days?
Let's see. Doesn't know about Indigenous issues.
That's kind of a big one when you're First Nations.
And when they're flaky.
Oh, yeah, ghosting is all too common these days. I second you on the flakiness.
Yeah, and when they only message you at night.
Oh, the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. you up text. That is a good list.
Yeah. That's all I can think of right now. There's probably more. Oh.
There's so many. And there's new and frightening ways to not trust people. One thing that I've heard lately on the TikTok is people using therapy talk to manipulate. So it's like you think you found a great partner because they'll go to therapy, but they're just going to use it to be tricky.
Another one is especially if it's not a non-Indigenous person, when they say, "Oh, I have you to teach me."
Oh no! You have to be a DEI consultant for free.
Yeah.
You know, I keep getting Instagram ads to be a DEI consultant. Oh, and for context, that's diversity, equity, inclusion. And I'm just like, I'm the whitest native you know. I should not be doing DEI. Like, my farmer's tan is the diverse part of me. Oh my gosh. So we've only kind of brushed the surface on your experience with lupus. So what kind of impact does that have on your dating life? How's it going?
Well, like I was kind of worried that people may not want to like date me just because I have lupus, and I guess it did affect like my dating life, because I had lupus for like I don't know how long, maybe 6-7 years. And it started to get really bad. Like my kidneys, like the lupus was in my kidneys. It swelled up there was like a lot of swelling, and it damaged them. So now I have kidney failure. And I find that, it's more difficult to date with kidney failure. And yeah, and the end stage is, like dialysis, which I go like 3 times a week. I have a catheter in my chest. I used to have a catheter in my belly for peritoneal dialysis, which is a different way of doing dialysis. And it did have like an effect on, my dating life. And I did meet someone, I met someone, and we're taking it serious, and it's going good. We're gonna shack up.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for a kidney transplant. I'm on the donor, like the deceased donors list, but it's gonna take like 5 to 6 years. And I am looking for, I guess like live donors. I do have about 2 of them getting testing done, which takes about a year to see like if it'll all work out, and they have to be like a match, blood type match with me.
So, do you feel comfortable talking more about what the process is for like going through dialysis?
Well, I had to have surgery. Like the one I have on my chest, I was awake for the thing. Like I had a double surgery that one day, and it was quite boring, to tell you the truth. I was in that room, I was getting tired. I was like, why don't they put a freaking TV in here? Or
No television.
You know? I
Wow.
was being mean to the nurse. I apologized afterwards, though. Hey, they felt bad. Like 2 weeks later, see my doctor again, and I was like, "So that was fun." No, I didn't give in.
Jeez, you make dialysis sound kind of fun, but I'm sure it's not as fun either. Because what happens after you go through it? Like, what do you feel like after you go through the dialysis process?
Well, they said I would feel better, but I feel drained. Like, I feel like shit most of the time. But it's helping preserve my kidneys, and you know how the world wants to preserve life and all that. And it's like, okay, I guess I can stick around longer. Hey.
Yeah, that's good. I would love to see you stick around longer, Lucille. You have such an amazing attitude, and it's infectious. I love it.
Yeah, and it's like it affected my self-love as well.
That's actually surprising to hear because you sound so confident. So, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I didn't like my body for the longest time, even before I got sick. But now I'm just like, okay, this is my life now. What do I do? How can I make things be better for myself? And I started loving myself more. You know, my body, my personality.
Well, you have a great personality, but for the folks that are listening that are struggling with their body image, especially experiencing disability, what's your tips? What's your advice to people? What are you doing that's working?
You know what helps a lot?
What's that?
Drinking tea. Freaking natives and their tea.
Oh my gosh, the Métis go pretty hardcore on the red rose.
You know what? I'm starting to look more sick. Like, I have dark circles that are, darker. Like, I always had dark circles, but I always, it's pretty kind of weird a little. So what I do to make myself feel better about myself, especially like I want to feel pretty, I just put on a little bit of makeup. With some concealer. It's okay to wear makeup. You want to wear blush so you can look more alive? Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. What great advice, and I'm not one to argue considering I'm full clown. I definitely think makeup is a great way to make yourself feel better and just to play around, get a little silly.
Oh yes, I like different looks.
Yeah.
Like I've done the Joker. I've done like the skull space sort of thing. Zombie Louise Bulkier from Bob's Burgers.
That's pretty good. Okay, so this has been such a treat. I just love your sense of humor. But we've finally made it to the last question, and I think one of the most important, because to kind of support our family and friends and our communities, we have to continuously be dreaming of this future that's better for us, that has less racism and tokenism and all these isms that we discussed today. So I want you, Lucille, to tell me, what do you imagine for the future?
I imagine. You know what? I imagine that Neechee Studio will have their own space, like in a permanent space, and I dream of an Indigenous arts and culture building.
Amazing.
Where Neechee can be like housed as well. Like we want permanent funding. We want to be able to make our own money to generate and be safer spaces for Indigenous youth and being connected to the community.
I feel like this future is already almost happening now. All you need is the building, and I love that you're envisioning it as like a hub so that other art collectives and Indigenous artists in Thunder Bay are also included. So I love your vision for the future. And before we go, we're just going to promote some of your PayPal links. Because we do want our audience, we do encourage our audience to donate to Lucille's fight against lupus. So you can find Lucille on PayPal me at their name, Lucille Atlookan, LucilleAtlookan. This is also where you can find them on Instagram. And you can also check out Neechee Studios on Instagram as well. And Neechee is spelled Neechee Studio. So thanks again for coming and making me belly laugh so hard. It was great to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be on here.
And thank you to our wonderful audience for listening, and we'll see you next month.
The MedFacts would like to acknowledge the support of the Ontario Arts Council and listeners like you. Please like, follow, and subscribe on our Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch, and where all podcasts are found.